Sonic the Hedgehog. For many years you entertained many a gamer with your quick-paced platforming games on the Game Gear and Sega Genesis. And of course, everyone remembers your disapproving foot tapping. Then you tried to enter the 3D realm, which is where you started to go downhill. Okay, so maybe that was a little bit harsh. Parts of Sonic Adventure and Heroes were enjoyable, but by the time Shadow the Hedgehog came out, I think that everyone was starting to get a bit fed up of things. Enter Sonic the Hedgehog for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. This game promised to fix what was wrong with the previous 3D outings, and indeed, from what we saw from what the media had to say with their hands-on time, it was certainly looking like it. Sadly, the opposite could not have been more true. The game is called Sonic the Hedgehog. I guess they wanted to put emphasis on the fact that they were trying to fix what was wrong, but it just causes confusion. Rather, the game is often referred to as Sonic 2006. So, let's start with the positives, or the few that there are, by starting with the CGI cutscenes. The guys who did these did a really good job. They managed to piece together a pretty cool action sequence with Sonic and Eggman. Unfortunately, there aren't many of them, and the quality of these cutscenes seem to deteriorate later on in the game. You can tell that the cutscenes are CGI, but you can also tell that not as much effort was put into crafting these ones than, say, the ones at the beginning of the game. Specifically, I'm talking about the cutscenes at the end of Shadow and Silver's story. However, for the most part, they're pretty well done. Another cool feature is the Extras menu, which lets you watch cutscenes or listen to music. The former is particularly good because it means you don't actually have to play the damn game to see them. The soundtrack in this game is a bit of a mixed bag. Some of the music is pretty good, but other songs are utterly unbearable. Take the theme of Sonic for example. Never heard anything so dire in my entire life. And what's up with the lyrics? He's got the dope sounds pumping in a stereo, kicking ass fast? I thought that Sonic was supposed to be a kid's game. Right, so on to what matters, the gameplay. You have 3 characters, each with their own powers. Sonic, Silver, and Shadow. Well, I say 3, but often while you're playing through the story you'll encounter another character who you're forced to play as. But for the most part, you'll be playing as Sonic, Shadow, and Silver. Sonic focuses on speed, or at least he's supposed to. Sonic is so slow in this game that it's unbearable. You can only reach a reasonable speed when he hits a speed mat, and you'll find yourself constantly starting and stopping in this game. You could be running along and suddenly a group of enemies appear. The solution to this in any other game would be to ignore them and to just run straight past them, but sadly this often isn't possible here. Quite often the enemies will be guarding a door that will only unlock when you defeat them all. This wouldn't be so bad if the combat wasn't so boring. The only worthwhile attack Sonic has at his disposal is the homing attack, and enemies with large health bars can take a considerable amount of time to defeat, and it really hurts the pace of the game when you're constantly starting and stopping. The only parts of Sonic's gameplay I liked were the marked speed levels, but these are short, often about a minute or so in length, and you also have to play through an entire level just to get one. It's just not worth putting yourself through so much pain and suffering to play these levels. Shadow's gameplay is very similar to Sonic's, except that Shadow has a slightly lower emphasis on speed and a slightly higher emphasis on fighting. Enemies with larger health bars usually aren't a problem with Shadow, but he still suffers from similar problems that Sonic has. You're constantly starting and stopping. Then you've got Silver, who is completely different from Sonic and Shadow. Silver runs much slower than these two, but he also has psychic abilities he can use to pick up enemy projectiles or crates, and then throw them back at the enemy. It's fun for a little while, but it gets boring and rather repetitive quickly. Additionally, the physics engine in this game doesn't do Silver any favours. You could be holding a large amount of objects at once, but when you throw them at an enemy, it could fling off in a random direction because it hits one of the other objects that you're holding. This is particularly problematic in the face-off against the final boss in Silver's story. On the topic of the story, it's overcomplicated for a Sonic game. Sonic has gone from a relatively plotless video game to something where you now have complicated plot elements such as time travel. Trust me, if you've played the game you'll understand what I mean. I wouldn't worry about it too much though, because the ending of the game's story is the equivalent of "it was just a dream." It's like Sonic Team knew this game sucks, so they just threw in a cop-out ending to pretend that it never happened. Quickly going back to the gameplay, you also play as a variety of other characters. These are called amigos, and they're extra characters you'll occasionally be forced to play as while playing as either Sonic, Shadow, or Silver. Unfortunately, most of these characters aren't enjoyable to play as. You've got Tails and Knuckles, who both run at a snail's pace. In fact, most of the characters aren't very fun to play at all. In particular, I have a problem with Rouge and Knuckles. If you glide into a wall and start climbing on it, there's a glitch that prevents you from jumping off. The only thing that you can do is kill yourself and hope that you get lucky next time. In fact, the only Amigo character that's fun to play as is Blaze, who has gameplay similar to that of Sonic's. Unfortunately, like other things that are good with this game, there's not much of it. Also, on the topic of gameplay as a whole, why isn't jumping an attack anymore? Jumping into an enemy in any other Sonic game results in the enemy's death, but here they just laugh at your futile attempt. Why the sudden change? The voice acting in this game is also atrocious. Check out some of these lines of dialogue that are in the game.
Elise!
Sonic!
I'll head into the jungle.
Okay. It is my duty as Princess of Soliana to go. There is no other choice.
There can be no excuse for the crime of which I'm guilty.
Mr. Sonic!
I've never heard anything so horrendous in my entire life. I mean, come on, Dramatic Cat puts more effort into his performance than this, and he doesn't even bloody say anything. Other issues include the camera, which simply refuses to behave itself. In boss fights it won't stay focused on the enemy that you're fighting, and if it is focusing on the enemy you're fighting, then it probably isn't focusing on you. I thought there was a no-brainer to keep the camera focused on the enemy and the player in a boss fight, but apparently not. When there's a button on the controller dedicated to resetting the camera angle, I think there's something wrong. I also have a problem with the town cities. These are just pointless and irritating in a lot of ways. They add nothing to the game but stupid little quests such as, can you guess which guard is the commander, and make the 3 bell towers ring. They're just pointless obstacles that make the game seem longer. I especially hate the forest area. Most of this area is just blank. There's nothing there, and it's so big that you'll find yourself doing nothing but holding forward to get from point A to point B for about half an hour. The game is also prone to various bugs and glitches. The whole game just feels like an unpolished mess. On the topic of glitches and bugs, the frame rate is also very unstable, and players will quite often experience a slowdown in the frame rate. It's odd, because this game isn't exactly using bleeding edge visuals. It's more evidence that the game was just cobbled together in about 5 minutes. Finally, the biggest problem with this game are the loading screens, and trust me when I say that you'll be seeing these a lot should you be unfortunate enough to play the game, especially with the aforementioned quests. You get a loading screen, some dialogue, and another loading screen. You can't help but ask, why was the game designed in this way? And another thing, what the hell have they done to Robotnik? Why is he skinny for? Is it to make him seem more realistic? Because trying to make a game with a hyperactive blue hedgehog in it seem realistic comes across as a rather pointless endeavour to me. Sonic the Hedgehog is the worst game I've ever played on this generation of consoles. The gameplay is boring and glitchy, and the story makes no sense at all and finishes with a cop-out ending. The sheer number of bugs and glitches in this game make me feel like I'm playing an alpha version of a game that would have sucked anyway. Even to Sonic fans, this game is considered a disaster. On the basis that this game fails to please even its own fanbase, I cannot possibly recommend this game to anyone. The only good things about this game are the CGI cutscenes, of which there aren't many. The cutscenes are hardly a reason to buy the game either, because you can just find them all on YouTube.